Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. When I walked out of the notary's office, a woman I barely knew stopped me. She leaned close and whispered, "Be careful. Don't sign anything for your daughter and son-in-law yet. Go to their house first. Look under the bed." I laughed it off. I trusted my family, but the next day, something wouldn't let me sleep. So I drove to my daughter's house while they were gone. There was a box under the bed, and when I opened it, I realized my life had already been planned without me. Hello everyone, welcome back. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Quick note, this story contains fictionalized elements for educational and entertainment value. Any similarity to real people or places is coincidental, but the lessons here might just help you or someone you love. My name is Elliot Gardner. I'm 67 years old, and for 40 years, I worked as an electrical contractor. Nothing big or impressive, just a small company, a dependable crew, and honest work. I retired 3 years ago, sold the business to my foreman, and believed I had finally earned a quiet life. 8 years after losing my wife, Vivian, I found a rhythm that worked. I lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't special, but it was mine. Every morning at 6:30, my dog Buddy would wake me by nudging my hand with his cold, wet nose. He's a golden retriever mix, 9 years old, with a graying muzzle and eyes that still follow me everywhere. I'd make coffee in the same coffee machine Vivian bought back in 2008. The calf cracked the switch, stiff but familiar. Buddy would sit patiently by his bowl while I measured his kibble. Then we'd walk 3 blocks to Henderson Park, circle the pond once, and head home before the sun climbed too high. Vivian would have liked that routine. She was a librarian for 32 years and believed order kept life from unraveling. When the cancer came stage 4, the doctor said she made me promise one thing. "Don't stop living," she told me from that hospital bed. Not just breathing, living. I kept that promise mostly. On Saturdays, I ran a free workshop at the community center. Basic electrical repairs for seniors, how to change a light fixture, how to install a dimmer, simple skills that saved people money and embarrassment. It gave me purpose, a reason to get dressed and leave the apartment. That's where things began to feel off. My daughter Kristen had been acting differently. She was 41, smart, independent. After Vivian died, she pulled back a little, but grief does that. I never questioned it. But lately, she'd been showing up more, dropping by without warning, asking questions that didn't quite sit right. "How are you handling the bills, Dad? Have you thought about downsizing? Do you have all your retirement accounts organized?" I told myself she was just being responsible, a good daughter looking out for her father. Still, something nagged at me. I mentioned it to my best friend, Roger Dalton, over coffee at Marsden's Diner. Roger and I had been close for 25 years, ever since his fire crew responded to a warehouse fire on one of my jobs. He was blunt, loyal, and allergic to nonsense. "She's probably just worried," he said. Linder used to do that with her dad, but Linder had been gone 10 years now, and Roger still flinched when her name came up. I knew the difference between concern and something else. The real warning came on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was restocking wire nuts in the workshop closet when Mrs. Shirley Vaughan approached me. I recognized her immediately. She'd worked as a housekeeper for Kristen and her husband Cody for years when they first bought their house. She looked nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder. "Mr. Gardner," she said softly, "I need to speak with you in private." We stepped into the small office I used for paperwork. She closed the door behind us. "I don't know how to say this," she whispered, twisting her hands together. "I care about your daughter. I really do. But I need you to be careful." My stomach tightened. "Careful of what?" She shook her head. "I shouldn't even be telling you this, but please watch what they ask you to sign. Watch what they want from you." Her voice cracked. "That's all I can say. I'm sorry." Before I could press her, she slipped out and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there alone, staring at shelves of donated tools, my heart pounding. Mrs. Vaughan wasn't dramatic. She wasn't a gossip. If she'd risked warning me at all, it meant something was wrong. That evening, I called Roger. 20 minutes later, we sat on my apartment balcony with 2 beers and Buddy asleep at our feet. I told him everything, Mrs. Vaughan's warning, Kristen's questions, the feeling in my gut. Roger went quiet. I didn't want to say anything. He finally admitted. But last week, I ran into Cody at the hardware store. My chest tightened and he was asking about you, about your finances, whether you'd done estate planning. I stared at him. He asked you that, said it was family concern, but Elliot, it felt like fishing. The air felt colder after that. That night, I didn't sleep. Buddy pressed against my leg as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan. Mrs. Vaughan's words replayed in my head. Watch what they ask you to sign. At 3:47 a.m., I made a decision. The next morning, I began paying attention. When Kristen called, I listened more than I spoke. When she mentioned paperwork, I asked for time. When Cody offered to handle things, I declined politely. They didn't push at first, but the visits increased. The concern became urgency. The questions grew sharper. And that's when I knew Mrs. Vaughan hadn't been warning me, just in case. She'd been warning me because something was already moving, something that involved my trust, my name, and my signature. And once I'd understood that there was no going back, 3 days passed. Like water slipping down a drain, I kept waiting for clarity, for something that would make Mrs. Vaughan's warning make sense. Instead, what came was a phone call that cracked my world open a little wider. It was Friday afternoon around 2:00. I was sitting at the kitchen table finishing the tuna sandwich, the same lunch I had eaten every Friday for nearly 30 years. A habit Vivian used to tease me about. My cell phone vibrated across the laminate surface. Kristen's name lit up the screen. Dad. Her voice was tight, pitched too high. Dad, I need your help. I'm locked out. Locked out of what? The house. I was taking out the trash. The wind caught the door, and now I'm standing in my driveway like an idiot. Cody's in Phoenix until tomorrow, and she stopped breathing hard. Can you bring the spare key, please? The spare key. I had almost forgotten about it. When Kristen and Cody bought their place in Westfield Acres 6 years ago, Kristen had pressed a brass key into my palm at the housewarming party just in case. She'd said, "You're the only person I trust with this, Dad." "I'll be there in 45 minutes, I told her. Buddy looked up from his spot by the radiator as I grabbed my jacket. "Not this time, boy," I said, scratching behind his ears. "I'll be back before dinner." The drive to Westfield Acres took me through parts of the city I rarely saw anymore. The old industrial district, where I'd landed my first commercial job in 1982. The shopping plaza that used to be farmland. The high school where both my kids had graduated, Kristen in 2001, Daniel in 1998, back when our family still made sense. I tried not to think about Daniel. Some wounds age but never healed cleanly. Kristen was pacing the driveway when I arrived, phone pressed to her ear. The house loomed behind her, all brick and vinyl with a 3-car garage and landscaping that probably cost more than my first truck. She ended her call when she saw me. "Thank God," she said, but didn't hug me. "Do you have it?" I pulled the key from my pocket. I had threaded it onto my ring that morning just to be safe. "Right here." She took it quickly. Not rough, not gentle. "Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate it." She didn't sound appreciative. She sounded anxious. I followed her up the walkway. "How have you been?" "We haven't talked in what, 2 weeks?" "Bit it. Work's been crazy." Her hands shook as she worked the lock. "You know how it is." I didn't, but I nodded. The door opened, and she stepped inside fast, like she wanted to block my view. Still, I caught a glimpse of the foyer, immaculate as always. Kristen had inherited her mother's need for order. "Well," she said, hovering in the doorway, "thanks for coming all the way out here. I know it's a drive." "It's no trouble. I could come in for a minute. Have some water before heading back." Something crossed her face. Fear, annoyance, gone too fast to name. "I've got a conference call in 10 minutes, she said. "Rain check." Over her shoulder, I noticed a door off the hallway closed tight, fitted with a keypad lock. The kind that required a code. "Is that near?" I asked. Kristen's jaw tightened. "Cody's study." He keeps important client files in there. Privacy right. But electrical contractors noticed details. That lock was commercial grade, the kind used for server rooms, not filing cabinets. I'll call you later. Okay. She was already closing the door. Send love you, Dad. Thanks again. The door clicked shut. I stood on her front step, staring at the brass house numbers 2847. My daughter's house. My daughter, who had just dismissed me like a delivery man who'd stayed too long. The drive home felt longer. Traffic thickened with rush hour. The sun sinking low, turning the sky the color of a healing bruise. I merged onto the interstate, replaying every moment. Kristen had been nervous. More than nervous. She'd rushed me out like the house was on fire. 10 minutes from home, I reached into my jacket for my phone and felt something else. The spare key. She had taken my keyring to unlock the door, but I had removed the spare before leaving, planning to hand it to her directly. In her haste, she never asked for it back. My heart picked up speed. I pulled into a gas station and sat there, engine running, staring at the key in my palm. I could drive back, return it, call first, explain or not. I sat there 20 minutes watching people buy gas and lottery tickets and live their normal Friday lives. Then I drove home, made dinner, and called Roger. Morrison's, I said, I'm buying. We met at 7. Morrison's diner was a relic from the 1960s red vinyl booth's checkered floor, a jukebox that still played records. The waitress knew our order without asking. I told Roger everything. He listened without interrupting, which meant he was taking it seriously. When I finished, he stared into his coffee. That keypad lock, he said. Those aren't cheap. I know. So why would Cody need that level of security for files? I don't know. And why is Kristen acting like she's hiding something? I don't know. Roger looked at me carefully. You raised her, Elliot. But marriage changes people sometimes, not for the better. I wanted to defend her. I couldn't. What do? I asked. You've got the key. I know. You could return it tomorrow. Keep things normal. Or find out what Mrs. Vaughn was warning you about. We sat in silence. Doris brought apple pie neither of us touched. I drove home under sodium lights. Took the elevator upstairs. Buddy greeted me, tail wagging. I sat on the floor with him, trying to quiet my thoughts. Near midnight, I placed the spare key on my nightstand. Such a small thing. Why did it feel so heavy? I told myself I'd return it in the morning. When dawn came, I made a different choice, one that would uncover truths I never wanted to face. Tuesday afternoon. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Westfield Acres, and I stood on my daughter's porch, holding a key that no longer belonged to me, if it ever truly had. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock. I'd driven out here 3 times since Saturday. Twice I sat in my truck at the end of her street watching the house, trying to find the courage. Once I made it into the driveway before turning around. But today I saw Cody's silver Lexus pull away at noon. He wore a suit, carried his briefcase, headed off to whatever business he claimed to run. Kristen's schedule was predictable. Tuesday afternoons meant yoga across town. 45 minutes each way, plus an hour class. I had time, maybe 2 hours. The lock turned with a soft click that echoed like thunder. I'm not a criminal. I've never stolen, never broken into a place, never cheated on my taxes beyond rounding a deduction. For 40 years, I built my reputation on honesty. Vivian used to joke I was so straight-laced I probably ironed my underwear, but I stepped inside anyway. The house greeted me with silence. Central air hummed softly. A clock ticked somewhere in the hallway. Everything was spotless, pristine, untouched by children or chaos. The kind of perfection money buys. I stood in the foyer, heart pounding, telling myself I'd only look quickly, return the key to the bowl by the door. Forget this. But I'd never been good at lying to myself. The living room offered nothing. Leather furniture, oversized television, coffee table books about Tuscany and French wine, expensive impersonal. The kitchen was next, granite counters, stainless appliances, a wine fridge worth more than my rent. I opened drawers, utensils, towels, the junk drawer, a stack of mail. Nothing unusual. I started feeling foolish. What did I expect? A confession letter. The hallway led to 3 doors. 2 were open. A guest room that looked unused. A bathroom with towels, so white they seemed decorative. The 3rd door was closed. The master bedroom. I hesitated. This felt different. Crossing into private space. A violation I couldn't undo. Mrs. Vaughan's voice echoed in my head. Be careful. I turned the knob. The bedroom was enormous. King bed, matching furniture, sitting area by the window, everything in gray and white. Kristen always liked order. I checked the nightstands. Kristen's side held a mindfulness book lotion, a sleep mask. Cody's had magazines and iPad reading glasses. Normal. Boring. The walk-in closet was bigger than my bedroom. Christine's clothes organized by color. Cody's suits lined up perfectly. Shoes, folded sweaters, a jewelry box, nothing. I was ready to leave when I crouched and looked under the bed. There was a banker's box pushed far back into the shadows. I lay on my stomach and dragged it out the cardboard, scraping the floor, disturbing a thin layer of dust. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were 4 folders, blue, red, yellow, and green. I opened the blue one. Property written in Kristen's handwriting. Inside was a stamped copy of my apartment deed, a real estate printout showing comparable sales, a handwritten note, current value $920,000. My hands trembled harder. The red folder read, Legal. Inside were articles about conservatorship and guardianship, highlighted sections. Margin notes need 2 doctors. 90-day evaluation. POA first. Power of attorney. The yellow folder had no label. Inside were dozens of pages, covered in my name, Elliot Gardner, over and over. Someone practicing my signature. The handwriting wasn't mine. It was Kristen's. I recognized it instantly. Birthday cards, notes on my counter, recipes copied from Viven's cookbook. My daughter had been practicing forging my signature. The room felt smaller, hotter. I dropped onto the floor, staring until the letters blurred. The green folder was the worst. Len. Inside was a multi-page document handwritten, organized in numbered steps. Step 1. Build trust. Increase visits. Ask about finances. Express concern. Late dad comfortable letting us help. Clinical cold. Step 2. Power of attorney. Vernon would draft it. Present it at a family dinner. Frame it as emergency planning. A note said, if dad hesitates, Martin can help convince him. I didn't know Martin. Apparently, he knew me. Step 3. Investment opportunity. Target $185,000 from my savings. Create a record of financial mismanagement. Step 4. Conservatorship filing. Dr. Morrison would provide an evaluation for $5,000. Emergency petition citing confusion and poor decisions. Timeline 3 to 4 months. Step 5. Property liquidation. Sell my apartment for $920,000. Buy me a condo for $78,000. Place remaining funds into investment accounts. Monthly care distribution $2,600. Step 6. Long-term care. Placement at Meadowbrook facility. Outskirts. Budget option. Visitation to be determined. Estimated health decline 5 to 7 years at the bottom. One final calculation split after expenses. Kristen and Cody 40%. Vernon 40%. Martin 20%. I sat there reading my daughter's plan to take my home, my money, my freedom, my dignity. I couldn't reconcile it with the girl who held my hand at her mother's funeral and whispered, "We'll be okay, Dad." Time blurred, shadows shifted, the air cycled on and off. Then instinct kicked in. Document everything. I photographed every page, every folder, every forged signature. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At the bottom of the box was a USB drive, black, small, labeled in Cody's handwriting. Insurance. I slipped it into my pocket. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Smoothed the dust. Backed out like a crime scene. I locked the door and sat in my truck, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. My own daughter. The USB drive would reveal the real monster behind this plan. I drove home in a daze, the USB drive burning like a hot coal in my jacket pocket. The 40-minute drive passed in a blur of highway exits and traffic lights. I'd barely registered. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, the sun had dropped behind the buildings, leaving the sky that deep purple shade that comes just before full darkness. Buddy greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging, body wriggling with joy. I barely noticed. I walked past him, past the kitchen, where my untouched breakfast dishes still sat in the sink, straight into the small second bedroom I'd converted into a home office. The desktop computer rested on a scarred wooden desk I'd built 30 years ago. Viven had bought me the computer in 2015, insisting I needed to keep up with the times, even though I'd been perfectly content with my flip phone and the public library. The machine groaned as it powered on its fan, clicking and whining like it was arguing with itself. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and turned it over in my hand. Black plastic, smaller than my thumb. Cody's blocky handwriting on the label insurance. Insurance against what? My hand trembled as I inserted it into the port. The computer chimed softly. A window appeared showing 3 audio files, each marked with a date. The first from 6 weeks ago, the second from 3 weeks ago, the third from last week. I clicked the first file. At first, there was only static, the hiss of a phone recording, then voices. 2 men. I recognized Cody immediately, his slightly nasal tone sharpened by self-importance. The other voice was older, deeper, and carried a cold confidence that came from somewhere uglier than experience. This had to be Vernon. "So, we are agreed on the timeline?" Vernon asked. His voice sounded like brushed steel. "Yeah," Cody replied. 3 to 4 months from getting the PA to final approval. "That's what you said." "That's conservative," Vernon said. "Could be faster if Morrison does his job properly." The old man's what, 67? At that age, any evaluation leans toward incapacity if the doctor knows what to look for. Old man, they were talking about me like I was already gone. "And the investment angle?" Cody asked, betting him to put money into your development project. Vernon laughed without warmth. "Foolproof, glossy brochures. Projected returns maybe a site visit. He puts in 185,000. 3 months later, the project fails, money's gone, and suddenly Dad can't manage finances. Same as the Griffin case, same as Jenkins. Works every time." My blood turned to ice. Griffin, Jenkins, real names. Vernon had done this before. "What about payoffs?" Cody asked. "You said we need witnesses." "Simmons is easy." Vernon said that neighbor of his, Patricia, she'll say anything for 750. She's behind on her car payment. Building manager, Tommy Garcia, 500 for him. He'll testify. Your father-in-law forgets things. Morrison's already on board. 5 grand for the evaluation. He's done 6 of these for me. 6. At least 6 victims. The recording continued. Vernon described Meadowbrook as ideal budget facility out by the highway, $2,600 a month, and no questions. He explained how they'd buy me a cheap condo to make it look responsible, $78,000 for 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, then the math, sell the apartment, liquid assets around $750,000 split $4,020, $750,000. My life reduced to numbers. The file ended. I sat in the dark office, light from the screen burning my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. I clicked the second file. This time it was Kristen and Cody. "Are you sure this will work?" Kristen asked. Her voice was tight. "He's my father." "I know," Cody snapped. "But your father's sitting on over $1 million while we're drowning. 3 months from losing this house." "Kristen, Vernon knows what he's doing." "That's what scares me," she said quietly. "What if someone finds out? What if Daniel finds out?" "Daniel." My son's name hit me hard. I hadn't heard it spoken in years. Not since the fight that broke our family. Not since I failed him. Your brother hasn't spoken to us in 15 years. Cody said he won't care. By the time anyone realizes it'll be done, your dad will be in Meadowbrook. The apartment sold, money invested. What's he going to do? Prove he's competent. The system doesn't work like that. I just remember him teaching me to wire a light switch. Kristen whispered. I was 12. He was so patient. We're surviving. Cody cut in. That's what matters. Vernon has it covered. Your dad will be taken care of. But they were abandoning me, planning to strip my freedom and dignity, and my daughter was allowing it. The second recording ended. My hands shook violently as I clicked the third file. Vernon again issuing instructions. Practice the signature until it's natural. Watch how he loops the L's. Make sure he's distracted when signing the PA. Maybe had a drink. Shaky enough for Morrison to claim motor decline. He explained the evaluation. Questions Morrison would ask. How I should appear confused. Ensure sleep deprivation. Maybe Benadryl in his coffee. Vernon said nothing illegal, just foggy. They'd planned everything. This wasn't desperation. It was professional. The recording ended. The screen dimmed. The room fell quiet except for the fan and my shallow breathing. I sat in the darkness, my daughter's voice echoing in my mind. He's my father. Yes, Kristen. I am. I had proof. I knew the plan. What came next would either save me or destroy what remained of my family forever. The next morning, Wednesday, less than 12 hours after listening to the recordings, I made my first mistake. I was so consumed by what I'd learned that I failed to notice Kristen's car parked 2 blocks from my apartment building. I'd barely slept, but he stayed pressed against my side all night, sensing my restlessness. By 5:00 a.m., I made a decision. I had to return the spare key. If Kristen realized it was missing, she'd know someone had been inside her house. She'd check what had been disturbed, the box, the documents, and then she'd know that I knew. I dressed in the dark fit buddy and drove back to Westfield Acres. At 7, the development was quiet. Sprinklers hissed over perfect lawns. Newspapers lay wrapped in plastic on driveways. Ordinary suburbia. Nothing like the schemes I'd heard recorded. I parked 3 houses down and walked to her door. The plan was simple. Slip the key through the mail slot with a note apologizing for the oversight. No conversation, no questions. As I bent to push the key through the slot, I heard an engine. Kristen's white SUV pulled into the driveway. My heart lurched. I straightened, the key still in my hand, scrambling for a reason to be there at 7:15 on a Wednesday morning. Kristen stepped out, yoga mat bag on her shoulder. She wasn't supposed to be home. Wednesdays were yoga days 9 to 10. I'd seen her schedule on the fridge before, but here she was walking toward me, surprise hardening into suspicion. Dad, her voice was careful. What are you doing here? I raised the key, forcing a sheepish smile. Morning, sweetheart. I realized last night I still had your spare key. Felt awful. Thought I'd bring it back before you noticed. She stopped several feet away. At 7 in the morning, I was already up. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd take care of it. I forced a small laugh. You know how I am. She didn't smile. She took the key, her fingers barely touching mine. The door was locked when you got here. I felt the trap. I didn't try it. I was going to slip it through the mail slot. But you were just standing there. I was hesitating. Didn't want to seem intrusive. She looked at the door, then back at me. Did you go inside? Of course not. Why would I? I don't know, Dad. Why would you come here this early? Her tone told me she suspected something. Maybe something was out of place. Maybe Cody had said something. Or maybe she was already nervous because of what they were planning. I came to return your key, I said evenly. She studied me, then walked to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. I started to leave, but she called back. Since you're here, do you want coffee? It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. I followed her inside. The house looked unchanged. Still Kristen moved with intense scanning. She straightened a throw pillow, opened a kitchen drawer, and closed it again. Coffee? She asked, already starting the espresso machine. Sure. While it hissed, she walked down the hall. A door opened. The bedroom. My pulse thundered. Had I missed something? A drawer. The box under the bed. She returned, expression neutral. Everything okay? I asked. Mom's jewelry box looked moved. She said lightly, watching me. It's usually centered. Maybe the cleaning lady. We let her go 2 months ago. Too expensive. Another sign of desperation. Maybe Cody moved it. Maybe. She handed me a tiny cup. Dad, have you been going through my things? Why would I do that? I don't know. You tell me. We stood there, a gulf between us that hadn't existed a week ago, or maybe always had. I came to return your key. I said quietly, I'm sorry if I worried you. Kristen set her cup down untouched. Dad, if you ever enter my house without permission again, I'll have to do something about it. Do you understand? The threat was clear. I nodded. Understood. But she opened the door. I'll call you later. I left. In my mirror, I saw her watching me, phone already at her ear. 20 minutes later, when I reached my apartment, Cody's silver Lexus was parked outside. He leaned against the hood, relaxed, casual. Hey, Pop, he said. The word felt rehearsed. Funny running into you. I live here, right? He walked beside me. Kristen said you seemed a little off this morning, so that was the story. I'm fine. Are you at the elevator? He faced me. Kristen's worried. She said, you've been asking about money, about our finances. A father worries. Sure, but we're doing great. His smile stayed shallow. No need to dig around trying to help. The elevator rose in silence. At my door, he said, if you ever need help, we're family. We take care of each other. I'll remember that. He watched me unlock the door, eyes on my hands. See you around, Pop. Inside. I shook. Buddy pressed against me. Then I saw it. Fresh scratches around the keyhole. Bright metal where brass should be. Someone had tried to pick my lock. Recently, they'd tried to get in. Looking for what? The USB drive. Nothing inside looked disturbed. Maybe they hadn't succeeded. But the message was clear. I changed the locks that afternoon. The hardware store was nearby, and Tom had deadbolts in stock. What's the rush? He asked. Lost my keys. Another lie. I hated how easily they came now. I installed the locks myself, hands steady, mind racing. But he watched from the hall. We're okay, I told him. But they knew I was on to something. And if Vernon Hutchins was as dangerous as he sounded, I was running out of time. That evening, I called Roger. We'd been friends for 25 years, ever since his fire crew responded to an electrical fire at a warehouse I'd been contracted to wire. If I couldn't trust Roger Dalton with this, I couldn't trust anyone. You free? I asked when he answered. I need to talk. Give me 20 minutes. No questions. That was Roger. His house sat in a working-class neighborhood, much like mine, well-kept and unpretentious. He'd lived there with his wife, Linda, for 30 years before she died of pancreatic cancer a decade ago. Now he lived alone, the same way I did to widowers who knew how silence could fill a room louder than noise. Roger opened the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, reading glasses perched on his forehead. One look at my face was enough. He stepped aside. Come in. His living room was tidy but comfortable. A worn leather recliner faced a television, usually tuned to sports. Photos of Linda lined the mantel above a fireplace he rarely used. The house smelled like coffee and old wood, familiar and grounding. Beer? He asked. Water's fine. He brought 2 glasses and we sat down, him in the recliner, me on the couch. Buddy had wanted to come, but I left him at home. This wasn't a conversation that needed distractions. I told Roger everything. The box under Kristen's bed, the documents, the forged signatures, the plan to take my apartment and place me in a cheap care facility. Then I handed him my phone and played the recordings. Roger didn't move as Vernon's voice filled the room, calm and predatory, explaining the scheme like a business proposal. When the first recording ended, Roger's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the strain in his face. The second recording was worse. Kristen's voice, hesitant, conflicted, but participating. He's my father. Roger closed his eyes. When he opened them, his anger was unmistakable. That bastard, he said quietly. And your daughter. He stopped himself, shaking his head. Elliot, I'm sorry, but she's involved. That recording makes it clear. I know. Vernon Hutchins. Roger stood and walked to the window, staring out at his darkened yard. I know that name. My pulse jumped. You do. Mike Torrers, my old fire captain. About 5 years ago, his mother got caught in a scheme, lost her house, most of her savings. The guy behind it was smooth, professional, got her to invest in a fake development project, then used that loss to prove she couldn't manage money. filed for conservatorship, sold her house, put her in a facility. He turned toward me. The man's name was Vernon Hutchins. The room felt smaller. Did she get anything back? Some, but she died 8 months later. Mike always said it wasn't the cancer that killed her. It was the betrayal. Roger sat heavily. If this is the same guy, and I'd bet it is, then he's done this multiple times. We sat quietly, the weight of that settling in. So Roger said, finally, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. What are you thinking? What's your next move? I don't know. That's why I came here. Okay, let's slow it down. His firefighter instincts took over. You've got 3 options. First, you confront Kristen. Tell her you know. Give her a chance to back out, and then she panics. They destroy evidence. Deny everything. Then, they rush the conservatorship filing before you can stop it. I nodded. Option 2, go straight to the police. That sounded good in theory, but Roger was already shaking his head. Problem is, your evidence is vulnerable. You got it by entering her house without permission. Any lawyer will call it tainted, and technically no crime has happened yet. Planning isn't enough. The police will tell you to come back later. My stomach sank. So option 3, you hire a lawyer, a good one, elder law specialist. You protect your assets legally, document everything, and prepare for them to move. When they file, you're ready. It was cold, strategic, and right. How do I find that kind of lawyer? Linder used one for estate planning. Allison Mercer. Smart, thorough. I'll get you her number. He paused and added, but there's more you need to know. Bart, I've seen Cody near your building 3 times in the past week. Sitting in his car, watching. I didn't think much of it until now. He met my eyes. They are monitoring you. The scratch is on my lock. Kristen's questions. It clicked into place. They tried to pick my lock this morning while I was at her house. Roger's expression hardened. Then they are escalating. That means time is not on your side. I can't do this alone. They're not. He stood and I followed. Tomorrow we call Allison Mercer. Tonight I'll make some quiet calls. If Vernon Hutchins has done this before, there will be records. Other victims' patents. If we can prove he's a serial predator, law enforcement won't ignore it. For the first time in days, something inside me loosened. I hadn't realized how heavy this had become until someone else was carrying part of it. Thank you, I said. My voice cracked. I don't know what I would have done if, hey. Roger gripped my shoulder firmly. You sat with me for 2 days when Linder died, but didn't leave. You made sure I ate. That's what brothers do. His voice roughened. I'm here now. I nodded, unable to speak. Go home, he said. Get rest. Tomorrow we fight back. I walked home under sodium street lights past closed stores and empty playgrounds. The November air was sharp winter on the way, but I barely noticed. My mind was already planning. Roger was right. I wasn't alone anymore. That night, Roger made calls. What he uncovered about Vernon Hutchins would turn my personal nightmare into something far larger, a patent spanning more than a decade. 4 names, 4 addresses, 4 families destroyed, and it was only the beginning. 2 days later, on Friday morning, Roger and I sat in the downtown office of attorney Allison Mercer. Roger's late wife, Linder, had worked with her years earlier for estate planning, and his trust in Allison was absolute. The office reflected that confidence in every detail, modern but restrained, efficient, without feeling cold. It was the kind of place that quietly promised serious problems would be handled seriously. Allison Mercer looked exactly like someone you would want on your side in a fight. She was in her mid-40s, dark hair pulled back in a professional but not severe style. She wore a charcoal suit and gold-rimmed glasses, and her handshake was firm enough to make a statement. Behind her desk hung law degrees from Georgetown, framed above shelves, lined with legal volumes and case law. Roger gave me the basics over the phone, she said as we sat across from her. But I need to hear directly from you, Mr. Gardner. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her everything from Mrs. Vaughan's warning to the box hidden under Kristen's bed to the documents, the forged signatures, and the USB drive full of recordings. Allison listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Her pen moved quickly, precisely. She showed no reaction, only attention, the kind that made you feel every word mattered. When I finished, she placed her pen down and leaned back. Do you have the evidence with you? I handed her my phone and opened the photo album. She scrolled through the images carefully, the handwritten plan, the practiced signatures, the documents meant to strip me of my rights. She zoomed in on details, her expression neutral. Then I played the recordings. Vernon's voice filled the office, calm and calculating as he laid out the scheme. Kristen sounded uncertain, but complicit. Cody spoke with cold dismissal about my value versus their future. When the last recording ended, Allison was silent for a moment. Then she looked up and her professional mask cracked just slightly. "Mr. Gardner, this is attempted financial exploitation of an elder," she said. "Legally, what your daughter and son-in-law are planning with Vernon Hutchins directing them constitutes multiple criminal offenses. Conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, identity theft. If successful, it would escalate to elder abuse and possibly false imprisonment." Roger leaned forward. "Can we stop them?" "Yes," Allison replied. "But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with." She turned to her computer and pulled up statutes. California's conservatorship laws exist to protect people who genuinely cannot care for themselves. Unfortunately, those same laws are often weaponized. The threshold to proving capacity is lower than most people realize. 2 doctors, statements from family or neighbors, claims of poor financial judgment. That can be enough for a judge to grant conservatorship. My stomach tightened just like that. Not instantly, but faster than it should be. Elder exploitation is widespread because the system can be abused. She scrolled again. Your daughter practicing your signature shows intent to commit forgery. Her written plan establishes conspiracy. As for the recordings, California is a 2-party consent state for phone calls, but in-person recordings only require single-party consent. These recordings were made by a participant. They are admissible. I didn't record them. I said they were hidden in her house. Allison's eyes sharpened. Even better. That makes them independent evidence. Cody documented his own crime. So what do we do? I asked. She pulled out a clean legal pad. First, document everything from this moment forward. Every interaction, every text, every voicemail. Second, we immediately secure your assets. We revoke any existing powers of attorney, place alerts on all financial accounts, and block unauthorized access. Third, we hire a private investigator to identify Vernon Hutchins's other victims. If he's a serial predator, it strengthens your case significantly. Roger nodded. I already have a few leads. Good, Allison said. Fourth, we build an airtight case before involving law enforcement. Right now, we have planning and intent. Police act faster once an overt crime occurs. We must be ready. Fifth, we prepare for a conservatorship filing because that will be their next move. They already tried to pick my lock, I said quietly. Allison's expression hardened. Then we're on a clock. Mr. Gardner, I need to be very clear. She met my eyes. Your daughter is an active participant. If we proceed, she will face criminal charges, possibly prison. Are you prepared for that? The question hit like a blow. Roger's hand steadied my shoulder. She was going to take my freedom. I said, my home, my dignity. I can't allow that, even if it means she faces consequences. Allison nodded. I needed to hear that. She recommended a private investigator, Jack Bowen, a former LAPD detective specializing in elder abuse and financial crimes. She warned us he was expensive. I have the money, I said. What I don't have is time. Then we move fast, she replied. She immediately began filing for emergency protective orders. These would prevent any conservatorship filings without a full hearing and freeze questionable legal documents. Then she prepared new legal instruments, a durable power of attorney healthcare directives, clearly establishing my capacity. She asked Roger to serve as my agent. He accepted without hesitation. For the next hour, we reviewed and signed documents until my hand itched. When it was done, Allison organized everything neatly. I'll file these orders today, she said. And Mr. Gardner, you're doing the right thing. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had changed. But everything had. By Monday, The protective orders were filed. What we didn't know is that Cody and Vernon were already moving, and their next move would force everything into the open. Jack Bowen looked exactly like I expected a retired detective to look. His face was weathered, lined by too many late nights and harder cases, his eyes sharp and observant, missing nothing. There was a calm about him that came only from having seen everything more than once. We met at a downtown coffee shop on Tuesday morning, 3 days after Attorney Mercer hired him. The shop was one of those independent places that hadn't been taken over by chains, yet filled with mismatched furniture and local art. Jack had chosen a table in the back corner, away from the rush of commuters grabbing their morning coffee. He was already there when I arrived, sipping black coffee and reading something on his phone. "Mr. Gardner." He stood and shook my hand. His grip was firm without being performative. "Jack Bowen, thanks for meeting me. Thank you for taking the case. Allison Mercer doesn't call me unless it matters," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "She gave me the outline. Now I need the full picture, and I need to see everything." I showed him my phone and walked him through it, all photos of the documents, the practice signatures, the 6-phase plan written in Christine's handwriting. Then I played the recordings, keeping the volume low. Vernon's calm, calculated voice, Christine's conflicted participation, Cody's dismissive comments about my worth compared to their needs. Jack listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather notebook. When the last recording ended, he leaned back and studied me. "You did good work, Mr. Gardner," he said. "Most people catch this when it's already over. By then, the conservatorship is granted, the house is gone, and they are sitting in a facility wondering how their life disappeared. What you've got here, documents, audio, timeline, it's solid. Can you dig deeper on Vernon Hutchins?" I asked. "Already half." Jack pulled out his phone. "As soon as Allison called Saturday, I started background checks. Vernon Hutchins, 64 lives in Enino, divorced twice, 1 adult son. On paper, he's a consultant and property developer. In reality, he's registered 7 LLCs in California over 12 years. 4 dissolved, 2 dormant, 1 active. What does that tell you? That he runs schemes through shell companies, then dissolves them when attention builds. Classic financial predator behavior. Makes prosecution harder, tracing harder, and escape easier." Jack scrolled. "I've confirmed 2 prior victims so far." My stomach tightened. "But Albert Griffin, 78, Riverside, 5 years ago. Vernon convinced him to invest in a development project. Used the losses to claim financial incompetence. Got conservatorship through a cooperative doctor, liquidated Griffin's assets. Griffin lives in a state facility now. His kids cut him off, convinced he squandered their inheritance. And the other, Norma Jenkins, 74, widow, San Bernardino, St. Patten, 3 years ago. Development investment, alleged failure, conservatorship, house sold. Vernon took 70% as management fees. She was placed in a low-cost facility and died 8 months later. 8 months, just like Roger's fire captain's mother. How many total? I asked. I'm still tracing dissolved companies. Harder work, but I've got a forensic accountant pulling public records. My estimate is 6 to 8 victims over the last decade, possibly more. Vernon's been refining this. Jack slid another document across the table. Here's Cody. Your son-in-law owes roughly $180,000. Credit cards, private loans, and patents consistent with gambling debt. He's 3 months behind on the mortgage and 2 months behind on both vehicles. Creditors are closing in. Jesus, there's more. Jack met my eyes. Your daughter was laid off 7 weeks ago. Marketing position company confirmed it. She's been leaving the house every morning to keep up appearances. She's on unemployment, but it barely covers expenses. 7 weeks. Kristen had called me twice during that time and never mentioned it. So they're desperate, I said. Desperate people make dangerous choices, Jack replied. Vernon specializes in finding people drowning financially. He offers help that looks like rescue, but tightens like a snare. By the time they realize it, he already owns them. What happens now? Now I dig deeper. I've scheduled interviews with Griffin and Jenkins's daughter. I want consistent documentation of Vernon's methods. I'm tracing money flows across his businesses. And I've begun public surveillance on Vernon, Cody, and your daughter. Surveillance. Nothing illegal. Public movements only. Who they meet, where they go. Schemes require coordination. And I want to know who else is involved. His expression hardened. They'll move soon. That protective order Allison filed will spook them. They'll either retreat or escalate. I bet his escalation. A chill ran through me. What kind? They may file for conservatorship anyway. They may try to paint you as unstable. They may attempt emotional manipulation. Or they may try to access assets before safeguards lock fully. People get creative under pressure. That's comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, Jack said. I'm here to prepare you. He finished his coffee. One more thing. Someone else has been asking questions about you. Not Vernon, not Cody. Someone tied to your old electrical contracting company. My chest tightened. Still tracing it. But there's another player. We shook hands again. Jack walked out looking completely ordinary, which was likely his greatest advantage. I drove home with his folder on the passenger seat. My daughter was desperate. My son-in-law was buried in debt, and a predator had turned their fear into a weapon aimed at me. I almost felt sorry for Kristen. Almost. Understanding betrayal doesn't soften it. That night, Roger called. Someone's asking questions at your old company, he said, about your assets, your mental state. Roger exhaled. Martin Reeves, your former business partner. Martin Reeves had been my business partner 20 years ago, back when I still believed my electrical contracting company might grow into something larger. We started small, just the two of us and a rotating crew taking on commercial jobs the bigger firms ignored. Martin handled finances and contracts while I focused on the technical work, and for 5 years the arrangement worked well. Eventually Martin wanted to expand faster than I was comfortable with. He pushed for loans, aggressive hiring, and risky bids. I wanted steady growth and a solid reputation. The disagreement wasn't bitter, just fundamental. We dissolved the partnership. I bought him out, kept the company manageable, and Martin started his own business. We stayed friendly, meeting for dinner once or twice a year, exchanging Christmas cards, asking about families. At least I thought we had. 2 weeks earlier, Martin had called. He sounded warm and familiar, suggested dinner, said it had been too long. I agreed without hesitation. We met at Morrison's Diner, where Roger and I often had coffee. Martin asked about retirement, about Kristen, about how I was managing a loan. At the time, it felt like concern. Now, it felt like surveillance. Sitting in my living room after Roger's call, I understood Martin had been fishing for information, helping Vernon Hutchins build a profile on me. The next morning, Jack Bowen arrived at my apartment with a folder. Buddy greeted him enthusiastically, and Jack scratched his ears before sitting at the kitchen table. Martin Reeves, Jack said, opening the file. 52, owns Reeves Construction, married 2 kids in college, looks successful on paper. Underneath, he's drowning. He laid out financial records and photos. 3 major projects had collapsed in 18 months. Martin had borrowed against his house, his business, and his retirement. Worse, he owed about $250,000 in gambling debt to private lenders. Vernon found him the same way he found your daughter, Jack said. Through desperation, Martin needed a lifeline, and Vernon offered one in exchange for helping set you up. Jack showed surveillance photos. Martin and Vernon at a bar, leaning close. Vernon handing Martin an envelope in a parking structure. Martin laughing with Cody at a restaurant. Martin introduced Cody to Vernon 3 months ago. Jack explained. He was meant to soften you up, suggest investments, maybe recommend signing power of attorney documents as smart planning. I felt my chest tighten. 20 years of history traded for money. How much did Vernon pay him? I asked. $15,000 so far, Jack said, pointing to bank records. And he was promised 20% once your assets were liquidated. There was more. Martin had been calling my former employees, asking about my memory, my mental state, whether I seemed confused. He was laying groundwork for witnesses. No one bought it, Jack said. That's why they called Roger. But Vernon builds cases brick by brick. I stared out the window, at my parked truck, my daughter, my son-in-law, my old partner. Everything felt poisoned. "What do we do about Martin?" I asked. "We use him," Jack replied. "He wants to meet you to pitch the investment. You wear a wire. I'll record everything. We get him talking." The idea made my stomach churn, but we needed proof. After Jack left, I listened to Martin's voicemail. He sounded cheerful, confident. I called him back and agreed to meet Friday morning. He promised a solid opportunity, perfect for someone in my position. When I hung up, I sat quietly, realizing trust was no longer affordable. The meeting was set for Friday, but on Wednesday, Jack called again with news about the Jenkins family, and what he found would break my heart all over again. I sat there longer than I meant to, phone resting in my palm, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. Every familiar sound felt suddenly fragile. I kept replaying old memories of Martin, trying to reconcile them with the man Jack had just described. The jokes, the long job sites, the nights we celebrated finishing a contract. None of it fit with the image of him trading my future for debt relief. What unsettled me most was how ordinary the betrayal felt. There had been no shouting, no threats, no dramatic moment where trust shattered. Just polite questions over coffee, friendly conversations, and careful notes taken behind my back. If this was what betrayal looked like, how many other people had missed it before it was too late? I thought about Kristen again, about how desperation had narrowed her world until stealing from her own father felt reasonable. I wondered how many steps separated fear from cruelty, and how easily good intentions rotted when money disappeared. Vernon hadn't created their greed. He had simply recognized it, fed it, and weaponized it. By the time the sun began to set, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about protecting my assets or stopping a conservatorship. It was about reclaiming control over my own narrative, refusing to let other people decide when my life was finished. I fed Buddy, locked the doors, and checked my phone once more. No new messages. The calm felt temporary, like the pause before a storm. Friday was coming, and with it the wire, the meeting, and another mask to wear. And after that, whatever Jack would uncover about the Jenkins family would change everything again. I didn't know the details yet, only that Jack's tone had shifted when he mentioned them. Experience had taught him when something crossed from disturbing into devastating. Whatever waited there, it would demand the same resolve as everything before it. I braced myself, knowing the week ahead would test every remaining illusion I still carried. Sleep would not come easily, and neither would forgiveness. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever for me. About 2 weeks after, I hired Allison Mercer on a gray Wednesday morning that perfectly matched my mood. I received a certified letter. The mail carrier made me sign for it, her face wearing that quiet sympathy reserved for bad news. My hands were shaking before I even opened the envelope. I already knew what it would say. Petition for emergency conservatorship. The heading was printed in bold at the top of the document. Beneath it were my daughter's name and my son-in-law's as petitioners. Beneath that was my own name listed as the proposed conservatee, the man who supposedly could no longer manage his own life. I read the petition with trembling hands. The accusations made my blood burn. Sudden cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, danger to self. They had constructed an entire false narrative stitched together from lies, half-truths, and paid testimony. Attached were the so-called supporting documents. A statement from my neighbor, Patricia Simmons, claiming I'd been confused and forgetful. A statement from my former building manager, Tommy Garcia, saying I'd appeared disoriented and unable to find my apartment. And a medical evaluation from Dr. Morrison recommending immediate conservatorship due to observed cognitive impairment. Every word was a lie. Carefully planned, deliberately coordinated lies designed to strip me of my freedom. The protective order Allison had already filed was supposed to prevent exactly this, but I quickly saw how they'd maneuvered around it. The order didn't stop them from filing it, only guaranteed that I'd be represented at a full hearing. So they filed anyway, forcing the issue and betting everything on speed and surprise. I called Allison the moment I finished reading. They filed, I said, emergency conservatorship. I just received the petition. There was a brief pause. Papers rustling on her end. I'm coming to your apartment. 15 minutes. Don't call anyone else. Don't touch anything. She arrived in 15. Allison spread the petition across my kitchen table, reading silently, her expression sharpening by the second. "They are rushing this," she said. "Emergency petitions are fast-tracked. The hearing is Monday. They are hoping we won't have time to build a real defense." "Can they even do this?" I asked. "With the protective order in place, the order doesn't stop filing," she said. "It guarantees representation, which you'll have." She looked up at me. "This is a panic move. They know you're close to exposing them. So what do? We go on offense," she said calmly. "First, you get an independent medical evaluation today. I'm calling Dr. Patricia Wolf, a geriatric psychiatrist I trust. Second, we gather witnesses, people who can testify to your competence. Colleagues, friends, anyone who sees you regularly. Third, we present evidence of fraud, not just to defend you, but to show the judge exactly what this is. And fourth," I asked, "we file our own motions, restraining orders, a request for investigation into Dr. Morrison. We make this impossible to ignore." That afternoon, Dr. Patricia Wolf met us at Allison's office. She spent 3 hours putting me through exhaustive cognitive testing: memory, logic, math, spatial reasoning, current events. I was exhausted by the end. Dr. Wolf smiled as she closed her tablet. "Mr. Gardner, your cognitive function is not only normal for your age, it's exceptional. There is absolutely no medical basis for conservatorship. I will testify to that under oath." That evening, Jack Bowen came by with updates from his investigation. He laid out the pattern we suspected but hadn't fully seen. "Vernon Hutchins has done this before," Jack said multiple times. "Same process, same doctor. He told me about Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman whose assets had been stripped after a conservatorship petition supported by Dr. Morrison. Her daughter Carol was willing to testify. I've identified 6 cases," Jack continued. "All involve Dr. Morrison. All involve Vernon or his associates. All end with the elderly person losing control of their assets. Morrison is paid $5,000 per evaluation." Jack slid a thick folder across the table. "This is the whole operation. Financial records, witness statements, timelines. Allison will present it Monday." Later that night, Roger came over. We sat at the kitchen table surrounded by documents, medical reports, depositions, recordings, evidence of a life being dismantled on paper. "They tried to declare you incompetent," Roger said quietly. "Your own daughter signed off on this." I nodded. "I never imagined it would come to this." "They're going to regret it," he said. We worked until midnight preparing for the hearing. Allison had scheduled final strategy sessions. Monday was coming fast. 5 days to defend my freedom. That night alone, after everyone left, I sat at the table long after the lights in neighboring apartments went dark. The documents stared back at me like accusations frozen in ink. Each page reduced decades of independence, discipline, and clarity into a checklist of alleged failures. I realized then that conservatorship was not about protection. It was about control, speed, and silence. Once imposed, it erased your voice before you ever had the chance to speak. That was what they were counting on. Confusion, delay, fatigue, a man worn down enough to surrender. But as the clock crept toward morning, something hardened inside me. This was no longer only about me. It was about everyone who had already been erased by the same system, and everyone who would be next if we failed. Monday would decide everything, not just money or property, but dignity, agency, and truth. I promised myself that no matter what happened in that courtroom, I would not be silent, compliant, or afraid again. Freedom once threatened sharpens resolve in ways nothing else ever can. Monday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of sharp winter air that wakes you before your mind is ready. The courthouse downtown stood imposing, its marble columns streaked with age and its oak-paneled walls heavy with decades of human drama. I climbed the broad stone steps with Allison on one side and Roger on the other. Each step, deliberate, feeling the weight of all 67 years settled deep into my bones and joints. Inside the courtroom smelled of old wood floor polish and something faintly metallic like dust disturbed after too many quiet years. High ceilings turned whispers into echoes that refused to disappear. At the opposing table sat Kristen and Cody with their court-appointed attorney, a young woman who looked freshly licensed and already overwhelmed by the gravity of what she had stepped into. In the gallery behind them sat Vernon Hutchins' perfectly still hands, folded neatly in his lap, like a man watching a chess match. He believed he had already won. I did not look at Christensen. I could not trust myself if I did. Judge Raymond Stokes entered precisely at 9. Tall, early 60s, steel-gray hair combed back, reading glasses balanced on his nose. His reputation for no-nonsense rulings preceded him, and for the first time in weeks I felt something close to gratitude as he took his seat. The petitioners went first. Their attorney presented the case with tight, nervous efficiency, sudden cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, danger to self. Patricia Simmons was called to the stand. My former neighbor testified that she had seen me confused in the hallway, fumbling with my keys, speaking aloud to no one. Lies delivered with the practiced calm of someone paid well to remember events that never happened. Tommy Garcia followed. The building manager from my old apartment claimed I had gotten lost in the lobby and once asked him what year it was. More fabrications. His voice stayed steady, but he never met my eyes. Then came Dr. Morrison. He took the stand with confidence, describing a brief evaluation in polished clinical language, memory lapses, poor judgment, inability to manage finances. He recommended immediate conservatorship for my own protection, speaking as though the matter were already settled. Allison stood and let silence stretch across the room until even the judge noticed. Dr. Morrison, how long did you spend evaluating Mr. Gardner? Approximately 20 minutes. And in that time you conducted a comprehensive cognitive assessment. I conducted the standard screening protocol, which tests did that include orientation questions, memory recall, simple arithmetic. Did you administer the many mental state examination? No. The Montreal cognitive assessment? No. Any formal neuropsychological testing? That was not necessary. Necessary for whom, Doctor? Allison asked calmly. Mr. Gardner did not seek your care. You evaluated him at the request of his daughter and son-in-law. Correct. Yes. And you were paid for that evaluation? Yes. How much? He hesitated just long enough to matter. $5,000. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Stokes leaned forward slightly. Who paid you? Vernon Hutchins arranged it. The man seated in the third row. Allison gestured and every head turned. Vernon did not react. How many evaluations have you conducted for Mr. Hutchins over the past 10 years? An objection rose and fell. 6. And all resulted in conservatorship recommendations benefiting family members financially. Allison said, placing documents on the bench. No further questions. Dr. Morrison stepped down, pale and shaken, avoiding everyone's eyes. Next, Allison called Dr. Patricia Wolfe. She described a 3-hour evaluation, a full battery of cognitive and neurological tests, careful and methodical. Her conclusion was clear and unequivocal. I showed no cognitive decline and was fully capable of managing my affairs. Jack Bowen followed. He laid out the pattern with precision. Vernon Hutchins, 7 LLCs, a decade of elderly victims, forged signatures, fraudulent conservatorships, liquidated assets. Financial records showed payments from Vernon to Dr. Morrison to Patricia Simmons to Tommy Garcia, all tied neatly together. Carol Jenkins testified last. She spoke of her mother targeted while grieving and alone, declared incompetent. Her house and savings drained into shell companies. She died in a state facility on Medicaid. Carol wept openly. I saw Kristen turn her face away. When the testimony ended, Judge Stokes removed his glasses and set them on the bench. I find no medical or factual basis for this petition. He said the evidence instead shows a coordinated effort to defraud Mr. Gardner through falsified evaluations and perjured testimony. He looked directly at Kristen and Cody. This petition is denied. The matter is referred to the district attorney. Dr. Morrison is ordered to appear before the medical board. Ms. Simmons and Mr. Garcia should expect contact from law enforcement. Relief crashed through me, sudden and overwhelming. Roger squeezed my shoulder hard. Allison allowed herself the smallest controlled smile. Kristen sat frozen. Cody flushed red. Vernon Hutchins stood and walked out without a word, his footsteps echoing briefly before disappearing. The judge adjourned the court. People filed out slowly. I rose, unsteady on my feet. Allison and Roger spoke to me, but their words blurred together beneath the rush of blood in my ears. Then I saw him. At the back of the courtroom stood a man I had not seen in 15 years. Tall, built like me, with Viven's dark eyes, older now, gray at the temples, lines at the corners of his face, but unmistakable. Daniel, my son, met my gaze across the crowded room, and the world went completely still. In that suspended moment, the noise of the courtroom faded, replaced by a silence so complete it felt unreal. Years of absence, regret, and unanswered questions pressed against my chest. Yet none of them moved me forward or back. I simply stood there breathing, knowing that whatever came next would change everything again. He did not smile. Neither did I. We only looked father and son, separated by time, memory, and a truth neither of us could yet speak. 3 days after the courtroom victory, I was still processing the judge's decision, the criminal referrals, and the look on Kristen's face when everything fell apart. But none of that compared to seeing Daniel walk through those double doors. My son, the child I had not spoken to in 15 years. I need to tell you what happened that night, because you cannot understand this moment without knowing how much I had failed him. 15 years ago, Daniel was 29. He came to dinner on a Sunday in October, the kind of perfect autumn evening when Viven would make pot roast and the windows would fog from the warmth inside. Kristen was there with Cody, still newlyweds. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "I'm gay. I've been seeing someone for a year. His name is Michael, and I'd like you to meet him." Vivian reached across the table and took his hand. "We'd love to meet him. Bring him for Thanksgiving." Kristen shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that's unexpected." Cody said nothing. Daniel looked at me. I should have spoken then. Instead, I nodded and told him that was fine. We were glad he trusted us. Fine, glad. Weak, powered words. Then Vivian mentioned she had updated her will, dividing everything equally between the kids. Half for Kristen, half for Daniel. Kristen set down her fork. "You're giving him and his partner half of everything. Daniel is my son," Vivian said quietly, "and Michael will be part of our family if Daniel loves him." Kristen's face went red. "That's not fair. I've been here. I've stayed." He left for Seattle and barely calls. Daniel stood. "I left because I needed to build a life where I could be myself. I'm not going to apologize for who I am. I'm not asking you to apologize." Kristen shot back. "I'm asking you not to expect special treatment." "Special treatment? I'm asking for the same thing you've always had, acceptance." I tried to mediate, said something useless about everyone calming down, about family being more important than money. But Daniel looked at me with disappointment. "You're supposed to be my father. You're supposed to stand up for me." Then he walked out. Viven followed him to the driveway, but he was already in his car. Later that night, Vivian sat at the kitchen table with tears running down her face. "We failed him. I told her we would fix it." I called the next morning. He did not answer. I left messages, sent emails. Viven wrote letters. He did not respond. Kristen apologized eventually in her way. She said she had been caught off guard, but the damage was done. Daniel had asked us to stand with him, and I had faltered. Viven carried that grief until she died. She kept a photograph of Daniel on her nightstand from his college graduation. She would look at it and say, "I hope he's happy. I hope he knows we love him." I carried it, too. I still do. So when I saw him at the back of the courtroom on Monday, 15 years of regret crashed over me like a wave. After the hearing, I walked into the courthouse corridor. Daniel was waiting near the elevator. He was graying at the temples now, with Viven's serious eyes. He wore a perfectly fitted suit and a wedding band. "Dad," he said, "we need to talk." We went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Roger came with us, quiet and steady. Daniel ordered black coffee and sat across from me. "I'm 44 now," Daniel said. "I'm an architect in Seattle, Michael, and I got married 12 years ago. We had a good life. I'm glad I managed. This is Vaughn called me 3 weeks ago. She still had my email from Mom's Christmas cards. She told me you were in trouble, that Kristen was involved. She said you needed family. Surely Vaughn contacted you. She said you were too proud to ask for help. I've kept track of you over the years, Dad. I knew when Mom died. I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral. No, you don't owe me an apology. I owe you one. I should have stood up for you that night. His eyes re-end. I was angry for a long time. But when Mrs. Vaughn called, I realized you're still my father, and Kristen is still my sister, even if she's lost her way. Roger spoke. Your dad's been through hell. Kristen tried to have him declared incompetent. Daniel nodded. Kristen called me 2 months ago asking to borrow money. A lot of money. I said no, but she mentioned an investment opportunity with Cody's father. I told her it sounded like a scam. She hung up on me. She was desperate, I said. Desperation doesn't excuse what she did, but maybe it explains it. We sat there for 2 hours. I told him everything. Vernon Hutchins, the recordings, the box under the bed, Dr. Morrison's fraud, the courtroom. He listened, and when I finished, he gripped my hand. I'm here now. Michael wants to meet you the right way this time, and I want to help however I can. That evening, Daniel walked back to my apartment. Buddy took to him immediately, tail wagging. Vivian always said dogs were the best judges of character. We sat on the couch, and Daniel told me about his work, about the house he and Michael had built, about the life they had made. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope that maybe not everything was broken beyond repair. Later, after Daniel left, I stood at the window and watched the city lights flicker on. Reconnecting with my son gave me strength I did not know I had. I was going to need it because in 3 weeks, Kristen was throwing a party, and I was about to do something that would bring this entire conspiracy crashing down in front of everyone she knew. 3 weeks after the hearing, with mid-November cold settling into the city, Kristen sent me an invitation. Her handwriting on the envelope made my stomach tighten. It was for her birthday party scheduled for the following Saturday. She had never stopped inviting me before, and apparently attempted fraud and perjury were not enough to break tradition. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the ivory card stock with its raised lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate Kristen's 42nd birthday. Cocktails and dinner 600. The Piedmont Room. The Piedmont Room was an upscale downtown venue with chandeliers and black-tie waiters. Kristen had always loved expensive settings. Cody had always encouraged them, even when they could not afford the price. I called Allison. 2 days later, we met in her office. Allison, Jack, Bowen, Roger, Daniel, and I sat around the conference table as Jack spread files in front of us like a commander preparing for combat. Vernon Hutchins is planning to run, Jack said immediately. I found one-way flight reservations to S. Paulo. He leaves Monday, 2 days after the party. He's liquidating assets, closing accounts, pulling cash, moving funds offshore. Brazil has no extradition treaty with the U.S. Allison added, if he boards that plane, he disappears. Jack opened another folder. Martin Reeves is unraveling. We have recordings of his calls. He's terrified Vernon will abandon him. He's asking about immunity. Then we act at the party. Allison said public exposure protects Elliot. Media attention prevents retaliation. Other victims will surface and Kristen and Cody's entire social circle becomes witnesses. I've coordinated with police. Jack continued. Detectives Murphy and Sanders are assigned. Surveillance will be outside the venue. Audio evidence is ready. Arrest warrants are prepared for Vernon. Cody and Kristen depend on what happens in the room. Daniel leaned forward. What's the plan exactly? Allison met my eyes. Elliot attends as a guest. During the evening, you confront Kristen and Cody publicly. We play the recordings. Jack signals the detectives. Vernon is arrested on sight if present. If not, he's picked up immediately. It will destroy her reputation, I said quietly. In front of everyone she knows. She tried to lock you away, Roger said sharply. She forged documents. She conspired with criminals to steal your life. You don't owe her protection. I know, I said, staring at the files. That doesn't make it easy. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. I'll be there, Dad. You won't face it alone. Judge Stokes had signed the orders. Allison had delivered complete evidence packets to the district attorney. Civil suits were being prepared against Vernon Drive, Morrison, Patricia Simmons, Tommy Garcia, and others. The system was already moving. Roger looked at me. "Are you sure you want to see her face when it collapses?" I thought of the recordings. Kristen saying Dad has over $1 million and doesn't know what he's doing anymore. I thought of the false evaluation, the conservatorship petition, the plan to sell my home and place me in a facility. She was ready to lock me away. I said, "I can handle watching her get arrested." That night alone, I was not as certain. The following days passed slowly. I bought a new suit, charcoal gray tailored, something Vivian would have approved of. Daniel came over, and we rehearsed the plan until I could repeat every step without hesitation. Roger called each evening to check on me. On Friday, I drove to the cemetery. Vivian's headstone was simple. Her name, her dates, and the words beloved wife and mother. I had chosen them carefully, though they felt insufficient. How could 6 words capture a lifetime? I sat on the bench nearby and spoke to her, as I always did. I couldn't save her vibe. I said, "Kristen, I tried. I believe patience would bring her back, but she's gone too far. Vernon pulled her in, and now she's committed real crimes. Tomorrow she'll be arrested." The wind stirred dried leaves across the grass. "I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I didn't protect Daniel years ago. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." My voice broke. "But I can stop her from hurting someone else. I can make Vernon pay. That has to mean something." I stayed until the sun dipped low and the cold forced me back to my car. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Buddy pressed close, sensing my unrest. I thought of Kristen as a child climbing into our bed during storms, whispering, "Daddy, make it stop." I would promise the thunder would pass, that she was safe, that I would protect her. Tomorrow I would create a storm that would destroy her life. It had to be done. That knowledge did not lessen the pain. Saturday arrived clear and cold. The party was scheduled for 6:00. I dressed carefully, studying my reflection. I looked older, harder, like someone who had survived a war. Daniel arrived at 5:30 wearing a dark suit and a solemn expression. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said, "but let's go." We drove toward the reckoning I had both feared and planned. The city lights streaked with a message from Roger Godspeed, brother. "We with you." I slipped the phone away and watched the streets blur by. In 1 hour everything would change. Vernon Hutchins would be in handcuffs. Kristen and Cody would face the consequences of their choices. And I would have to live with what I had done to my daughter. The Piedmont room rose ahead, glowing against the November night. Justice, I had learned, never came without a cost. The Piedmont room was exactly the kind of place Kristen and Cody could not afford, which made sense now that I understood their financial situation. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths and polished silverware. About 50 guests mingled with champagne flutes, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Kristen had always loved hosting parties, loved being the center of attention. Daniel and I walked in at 6:15. The room temperature seemed to drop. Conversations faltered, heads turned. I saw recognition flicker across faces, some surprised, some confused, a few openly shocked. Daniel's 15-year absence was common knowledge in this crowd. His return with me at his side sent a clear message, even if no one yet understood what it meant. A woman I vaguely recognized approached someone from Kristen's book club. "Mr. Gardner, it's so good to see you. We heard about that terrible misunderstanding with the conservatorship. Thank goodness it got cleared up." Misunderstanding cleared up. Kristen had been busy spinning the narrative. Another guest, one of Cody's colleagues from the construction firm, clapped me on the shoulder. "Glad you're doing better, sir. Family stuff can get complicated, but I'm sure it's all worked out now." I smiled tightly and said nothing. Kristen spotted us from across the room. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, calculation, fear, and finally a bright artificial smile. She glided over in an emerald cocktail dress, arms outstretched. "Dad, I'm so glad you came. And Daniel." Oh. She hesitated clearly, unsure how to greet the brother she had driven away 15 years ago. "It's been a long time." "It has," Daniel said coolly. "Well, this is wonderful. A real family reunion." Kristen's voice was too loud, too cheerful. She looped her arm through mine and steered me toward the center of the room. "Not everyone, my father is here." A photographer appeared, a young man with an expensive camera. "Let's get a family picture, shall we?" Birthday girl with her dad and brother. We arranged ourselves awkwardly. Kristen between Daniel and me, her smile frozen in place. The camera flashed. I wondered if that photograph would someday be used as evidence. Cody hovered nearby, his eyes tracking my every movement. He looked thinner than he had at the courthouse, hollowed out by stress. Vernon Hutchins stood near the bar, perfectly at ease, charming a cluster of guests with some story that had them laughing. Martin Reeves lurked by the windows, nursing a drink and avoiding my gaze. I noticed another woman sitting alone at a corner table, older with gray hair pulled back in a bun and tired eyes. Nancy Hutchins, Cody's mother. She did not look like she wanted to be there. The party rolled forward. Waiters circulated with hors A three-tiered cake sat on a table near the wall, white frosting decorated with sugar flowers. The DJ played tasteful jazz. It was all very elegant, very expensive, very much a performance. At 7:00, Cody stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my beautiful wife," he began, his voice steady despite the sweat on his forehead. "Kristen, you mean everything to me. I'm grateful for your love, your patience, and your strength through some challenging times." He paused. "I also want to thank Vernon, my father, for his guidance and wisdom. He's taught me a lot about family and responsibility." A light applause. Vernon raised his glass with a modest smile. Then Kristen stirred. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though I saw no tears. "I'm so touched by all of this," she said, her voice wavering just enough to sound vulnerable. "This past year has been difficult. We've faced challenges as a family, health issues, misunderstandings, painful decisions." She looked directly at me. But I believe families can overcome anything if they stay together and support each other." More applause. Several guests nodded approvingly. "In fact, I want to make an announcement." Kristen smiled and gestured toward me. "Dad, can you come up here?" My heart began to pound. Daniel's hand touched my elbow briefly, a warning, a reassurance. I stood and walked to the front of the room. 50 faces watched me, with polite interest. Kristen took my hand. "My father has been dealing with some health concerns lately. Memory issues, confusion, difficulty managing finances." She spoke clearly, ensuring everyone heard. "It's been hard to watch someone you love struggle. But Cody and I have been working with medical professionals to make sure Dad gets the care he needs. We are in the process of establishing a conservatorship to protect him and his assets." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sympathetic faces, pitying glances. She was doing it, announcing the conservatorship plan, publicly boxing me in, making it socially impossible for me to object without looking unstable. This was the moment. Now or never. I reached out and took the microphone from her hand. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I have an announcement, too." The room went silent. Kristen's smile faltered. Cody straightened, alarm flashing across his face. Then the back doors opened. Detectives Murphy and Sanders stepped inside, their badges visible on their belts. They positioned themselves near the exits, eyes scanning the room with professional calm. Vernon Hutchins saw them immediately. His charming smile evaporated. He began moving casually toward the side door, trying not to draw attention. Martin Reeves went pale and set down his drink with a shaking hand. Daniel moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell this room full of Kristen's friends and Cody's colleagues exactly what had been planned for me. The forged signatures, the fraudulent medical evaluations, the conspiracy to steal everything Viven and I had built. But before I could finish my first sentence, something happened that shocked even me. Someone I had trusted more than anyone else in this entire nightmare stepped forward, and what they said would be repeated in this social circle for years to come. Before I reveal who stepped forward and what they said that night, type the number 67 in the comments if you're still here with me. I need to know you're ready for what's coming next, because this moment changed everything. And a quick reminder, The story ahead contains fictionalized elements and may not reflect exact real events. If you'd rather not continue, feel free to pause here and explore other content. The shock I mentioned came without warning. Dr. Morrison, the corrupt physician who had evaluated me, rose from his table. Instead of running, he began shouting. I was forced. Morrison cried, his voice cracking across the room. Vernon Hutchins forced me to do this. Every head turned. Morrison's face flushed red, sweat shining on his forehead. His hands trembled as he pointed directly at Vernon. Stay. He paid me $5,000 per evaluation. Morrison blurted out. 6 evaluations over 10 years. He threatened me. I have gambling debts. He said he'd expose me to the medical board and destroy my career. I had no choice. His words spilled faster, panicked, and raw. There were others, too. Albert Griffin, Norma Jenkins, Franklin Wade, Margaret Sullivan. He targeted vulnerable elderly people, and I helped him. God help me. I helped him. Detective Murphy approached with calm authority. Sir, you need to come with us. Morrison collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward and secured him. The room erupted into shocked murmurs. Several guests edged toward the exits, whispering urgently. I took the microphone again, my hands steady despite the chaos around me. My daughter and son-in-law, I said clearly, projecting my voice over the confusion, along with Vernon Hutchins, conspired to steal my home, my savings, and my freedom. They planned to have me declared incompetent, using fraudulent medical evaluations, forge my signature on legal documents, and place me in a care facility while they liquidated my assets. I nodded to Jack Bowen near the sound system. Moments later, Vernon's voice filled the room through the speakers. We'll get the old man to sign the power of attorney at the family dinner. Martin will help if he hesitates. Once that's done, we move on the conservatorship, Morrison's evaluation, the emergency petition. 3 to 4 months. We're liquidating the apartment to Cody's voice followed. And Dad goes where? A Meadowbrook, Vernon replied. $2,600 a month, covered by the drawer. The recording ended. The silence that followed pressed down like a physical weight. Half the guests were already leaving, grabbing coats and purses, murmuring apologies or saying nothing at all. The rest stood frozen, staring. Vernon made his move. He bolted toward the side exit, expensive shoe slipping on the polished floor. Detective Sanders stepped into his path, solid and unyielding. Knock, sir. Stop right there. Vernon tried to shove past him. Sanders caught his arm, twisted it smoothly behind his back, and drove him to the floor. Vernon fought, his face contorted with rage, but Sanders was younger, stronger, and trained. Within seconds, Vernon lay face down, handcuffed, snapping shut around his wrists. And you can't do this. Vernon screamed, spittle flying. I know people. I'll have your badge. You'll regret this. Detective Murphy joined Sanders, hauling Vernon to his feet. Vernon Hutchins, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent. Jack Bowen crossed the room toward Martin Reeds, who had gone pale and rigid. Jack's voice carried clearly in the stunned quiet. Martin Reeds, you introduced Cody Hutchins to Vernon. You received $15,000 from Vernon's LLC. You contacted Elliot's former employees to plant claims that he was becoming incompetent. Do you want to tell everyone here you didn't know what was happening? Martin's mouth opened and closed. I didn't. Jack pulled out his phone and played another recording. And I need the rest of the money. Martin's voice said shaky, but clear. I've done everything you asked. The employees are saying the right things. Just get me the cash so I can settle with the casino. You'll be paid after the conservatorship, Vernon replied. Not before. Keep your mouth shut. Martin looked around at the faces staring at him with disgust and horror. Then he turned and walked out, shoulders slumped, a broken man. That was when Nancy Hutchins stood. Cody's mother had been so quiet all evening. I had nearly forgotten she was there. She moved slowly to the center of the room, her lined face set with grim resolve. I need to say this, she told Detective Murphy. I was part of it, too. Cody's head snapped up. Mom, no. See, I gave Vernon $50,000. Nancy continued, her voice steady. He promised a 30% return. I have debts, medical bills from your father's illness, Cody. I believed it was a legitimate development project. By the time I realized the truth, I was already implicated. I'm guilty. Murphy nodded. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Cody stared at his mother, stunned. You knew what Dad was doing. Nancy did not answer. An officer led her away, her hands clasped as if already praying for forgiveness. Then Kristen broke. Daddy, please. She stumbled toward me, mascara streaking her face. Don't let them do this. I'm your baby girl. I looked at her and felt nothing. He made me do it. Kristen sobbed, gripping my arm. Cody was desperate. He had so much debt. I didn't want to hurt you. I saw you practicing my signature, I said quietly, page after page. That wasn't Cody forcing you. That was you. Her tears stopped instantly. Her face hardened into something cold. You should have helped us. She snapped. You sat on your $1 million fortune while we drowned. There it was. Not desperation, greed. Kristen Gardner and Cody Hutchins. You are being placed under arrest. Kristen screamed as the cuffs closed. Cody stood silent, hollowed. The remaining guests scattered within minutes. Soon only police. Jack, Roger, Daniel, and I remained. Daniel crossed the room and hugged me. It's over, Dad. Roger squeezed my shoulder. Everything went exactly as planned. Jack nodded. They'll be processed tonight. Arrangement Monday. The case is airtight. I turned as Mrs. Shirley Vaughan approached, leaning on her cane. Now you stood up for all of us, she said softly. I could not speak. Police led the arrested away. Vernon shouting, Morrison crying, Nancy dignified, Kristen sobbing, Cody staring blankly in shock as the reality of their ruin set in. I stood beneath the chandeliers, surrounded by abandoned glasses and cake. Justice had been served. I felt only emptiness. Daniel drove me home, but he greeted me joyfully. I sat in the dark until sleep came. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. What followed would test forgiveness and define my life. Monday morning after the party, I saw my face on the local news. Elderly man exposes daughter's conspiracy. Read one headline. Family fraud ends in dramatic party arrest. Read another. My phone would not stop ringing. Roger fielded most of the calls. Reporters, producers, distant relatives, even a podcast host wanting a 3-part series. Everyone wanted the story. I declined almost all of them, but I agreed to speak with one journalist, an investigative reporter named Rebecca Marshall, who had spent a decade covering elder abuse and financial exploitation. She came with a notebook instead of cameras, asked thoughtful questions instead of seeking sound bites, and listened when I told her this was about more than my family. This was about a pattern, a system, a predator who had destroyed lives for over 10 years. The article ran a week later. Within days, 3 more victims of Vernon Hutchins came forward, then 5 more. Then, a woman from Nevada who said Vernon had used the same scheme on her father in 2018. The scope of what Vernon had done emerged like a photograph, developing each detail, making the picture clearer and more horrifying. Allison kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Vernon faced 15 to 25 years in prison. Kristen was looking at 5 to 10 years. Cody 5 to 8. Nancy Hutchins faced 3 to 5 years as an accomplice. Dr. Morrison would serve 3 to 7 years with his medical license permanently revoked. Martin Reeves cooperated with prosecutors. He wore wire-captured conversations with other potential targets and testified before a grand jury. In exchange, he would likely receive probation instead of prison time. I could not hate him for saving himself. Desperation makes cowards of us all. I filed civil suits against everyone involved. Vernon, Christensen, Cody, Nancy, Dr. Morrison, even Patricia Simmons and Tommy Garcia, the neighbors who had lied. Other victims filed similar suits. Vernon's assets were frozen. The house in Enino, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, all would eventually be divided among the people he had destroyed. But money does not heal what gets broken. I made decisions about my own finances. With Allison's help, I sold the apartment, the place where Vivian and I had built our life, where we had raised our children, where I had lived for 42 years. Too many memories lived in those walls, both beautiful and terrible. I could not stay in more. The apartment sold for $920,000. I bought a smaller place across town for $285,000, 2 bedrooms, modern, accessible, with a balcony where Buddy could lie in the sun. The remaining money went into conservative investments and two trust funds. $200,000 for a nonprofit providing legal assistance to elderly people facing exploitation, and $150,000 for a scholarship fund benefiting children of public school teachers. Vivian had been a teacher once. She would have approved. Packing took 3 weeks. Daniel came most evenings to help. We sorted through 4 decades of accumulated life kitchen gadgets. Vivian had loved books with her notes in the margins, photo albums documenting graduations and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays that now seemed precious beyond measure. In Vivian's closet, I found a box of letters she had saved, birthday cards from Kristen spanning 30 years, Mother's Day notes full of love and gratitude, a Father's Day card from Daniel sent the year after he left that Vivian had kept even though he never wrote again. I sat on the bedroom floor and read them all, and I wept. Buddy adapted to the new apartment faster than I did. He found his spot by the balcony door within an hour and claimed the sunny patch of floor as his own. Dogs understood better than people that home was not a place. It was simply where you felt safe. Daniel and I had dinner twice a week now. He brought Michael to meet me on a Sunday afternoon in early December. Michael was a quiet man with kind eyes who designed sustainable buildings and called Daniel sweetheart when he thought I was not listening. We talked about architecture and Seattle rain and what it meant to build a life with someone you loved. Michael showed me pictures of the house they had designed together, wood and glass and light perched on a hillside with views of the Sound. You should visit, Michael said. Stay with us for a week. I'd like that, I said, and meant it. On my final night in the old apartment, after everything was packed and the movers had taken the last boxes, I stood by the window where I had looked out thousands of times. This was where Vivian and I had built our life, where we had raised our children, where my daughter had conspired to take everything from me. I turned off the lights and closed the door and left the keys on the kitchen counter for the new owners. Some chapters must end whether we want them to or not. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Hearings, depositions, plea negotiations, sentencing dates that got postponed and rescheduled. Allison handled most of it, but I attended when needed, sat in courtrooms that all looked the same, watched lawyers argue over the ruins of my family. But during those months, something unexpected began to happen, something that would force me to decide what forgiveness truly meant and whether some betrayals could ever really be healed. 6 months after the party spring arrived, my new apartment had a small balcony where I could sit with Buddy and watch the sunrise. I had started teaching again Saturday workshops on basic electrical repairs for seniors at the community center, and the work grounded me. It made me feel useful, like I still had something to give. Routine became my anchor. I woke at 6, drank coffee on the balcony, Buddy's head resting on my knee as the sky shifted from gray to gold. Breakfast errands, a walk in the park. Saturdays were for the workshops, teaching retirees how to replace light switches or troubleshoot circuit breakers. Tuesdays, I volunteered at the elder protection nonprofit I had helped fund, answering phones and listening to stories that echoed my own. I had become a local voice on financial exploitation. Senior centers, churches, and legal aid groups invited me to speak. I told my story plainly. I watched faces change from polite interest to recognition. After every talk, someone would pull me aside and whisper that they feared something similar was happening to them or someone they loved. Roger and I had dinner every Wednesday, sometimes at his place, sometimes at mine, occasionally at Morrison's Diner, where Doris still served the best apple pie around. We talked about baseball weather and his consultant work. We did not talk about Kristen, unless I brought her up. He knew how to be present without pressing. Daniel called twice a week. He and Michael visited once a month, driving down from Seattle to spend long weekends with me. Michael's quiet humor reminded me of Vivian, and the way he studied Daniel filled me with gratitude. We went to museums, baseball games, cooking classes where we failed at pasta and laughed until it hurt. Mrs. Shirley Vaughn became part of my regular life. She attended the Saturday workshop, sometimes sitting in the back row. Over coffee one afternoon, she told me she had nearly been targeted by a similar scheme years earlier. A man posing as a financial advisor had asked invasive questions and planted doubts about her competence. She recognized the pattern because her sister had lost everything to the same con decades before. "That's why I knew," she said. "That's why I called Daniel. I saw Vernon Hutchins talking to Cody and understood immediately. You saved my life." I told her. "You saved yourself," she replied gently. "I just made a phone call. I made a new friend, Franklin Wade, a retired civil engineer who came to the workshops hoping to learn residential wiring so he could restore an old Victorian house. He was widowed like me with a dry wit and a love of woodworking. We began meeting Sundays to build shelves, frames, and a porch bench. He knew nothing of my past, saw me only as Elliot, and that mattered more than I expected. The legal outcomes came slowly. Vernon Hutchins received 18 years. Dr. Morrison got 5 and lost his medical license permanently. Nancy Hutchins, who cooperated and showed real remorse, received 2 years. Cody got 6. Kristen received 7 years in a women's correctional facility 200 m away. Her first letter arrived 4 months into her sentence. I nearly threw it away, but Roger urged me to read it. It was angry and accusatory. She blamed me for ruining her life, claimed I had always loved Daniel more, said I could have stopped everything if I wanted to. She insisted Vivian would have forgiven her. I did not reply. The second letter arrived 2 months later. The handwriting was slow or careful. She wrote that she did not expect forgiveness, that she saw clearly now the greed, entitlement, and lies, that she had betrayed her mother's memory. She said she was sorry, truly sorry for the fear she caused and what she tried to take. She said she was trying to understand who she had become and who she wanted to be. If I never wanted to hear from her again, she would accept it. I read the letter 3 times. I showed it to Roger, who stayed silent. I showed it to Daniel, who said, "Whatever you choose, Dad, I'll support you." I began therapy with Dr. Ellen Parrish, who specialized in family trauma. She didn't give advice. She asked questions. What did forgiveness mean to me? Was anger protecting me or trapping me? Could Kristen, my daughter, and Kristen, who betrayed me, be separated? I had no answers. I placed Kristen's second letter on my kitchen counter where I would see it every morning. Forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was something you chose again and again or didn't. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. And maybe that was acceptable. Life continued regardless. In late April, Daniel called with news that filled my chest with light. He and Michael were adopting a baby girl due in June. I was going to be a grandfather. Mrs. Vaughan invited me to her granddaughter's wedding in July. "Your family," she insisted. The workshops grew from 5 people to 20. A woman brought her elderly mother afraid to call electricians. I taught her how to reset a breaker and change a fixture. She cried, hugged me, and said I had given her back her independence. Spring eased into early summer. Buddy befriended the mail carrier. Tomatoes grew in pots on my balcony. And one morning in late May, I made a decision that would close one chapter of my life and open another. 1 year after the party, almost to the day, I stood at a podium in the city conference center. The Elder Protection Network had invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference. Nearly 200 people were there to hear my story. I had spoken publicly before, but this felt different, larger than me, larger than what had happened to my family. I stood with a bottle of water and note cards I barely needed because I had lived every word. "My name is Elliot Gardner," I began. "A year ago, my daughter tried to have me declared incompetent so she could steal my home, my savings, and my freedom. She nearly succeeded." The room went completely silent. I told them everything. The warning signs I missed, the recordings that saved me, the people who stood beside me when my own blood turned against me. I explained how conservatorship fraud works, the red flags, the importance of documentation. I talked about finding allies, attorneys who understood elder law, investigators who knew financial crime, friends who refused to let you face it alone. "Trust your instincts," I said, looking out over faces, young and old. "If something feels wrong, it probably is." Document everything. Keep copies. Tell someone you trust what's happening, even if you're ashamed, even if it's family. I paused, steadying myself for the part that mattered most. Family can be blood or chosen. Sometimes you need both. The woman who warned me wasn't related to me. The friend who sat beside me in court wasn't blood. My son, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, came back when I needed him most. Together, we stopped it. When I finished, the room rose in applause. People stood. Some were crying. Afterward, they lined up to shake my hand, to share their stories, to ask questions, or simply to say thank you. A woman in her 70s held my hand tightly. "My nephew keeps asking about my finances," she whispered. I thought I was paranoid. "Document everything," I told her, "and talk to an elder law attorney. Don't wait." Later, the organizers told me that 3 additional victims of Vernon Hutchins had come forward. They received restitution from frozen assets. New oversight laws for conservatorships had passed, requiring independent evaluations and regular court reviews. The Gardner case had been cited during legislative debate. My story had helped change the system. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to protect others. That evening, Mrs. Shirley Vaughan hosted a small celebration dinner at her home. She invited what she called the family that matters: Roger, Franklin, Daniel, Michael, and me. We sat around her table with good food and better company, toasting survival, second chances, and the strange ways life brings people together. Daniel brought photos of baby Viven. The adoption had been approved 2 months earlier, and I had flown to Seattle the day after they brought her home. She was perfect, dark eyes like her grandmother, a serious expression like Daniel's as a baby, tiny fingers that gripped mine with surprising strength. "Mom would have loved her," Daniel said quietly. "She does," I replied, "wherever she is." Buddy had turned 10 that spring. He moved slower now, muzzle gray naps longer, but he still followed me everywhere. Franklin had taught me how to build a wooden crib, hand sanded and finished with safe stain. It now sat in Daniel and Michael's nursery, waiting for Viven to grow. Kristen's 3rd letter arrived in April. The tone was different. No anger, no excuses, just remorse. She wrote that she was in therapy, that she finally understood how she justified turning me into an obstacle instead of a person, how greed and entitlement had been easier than honesty. She said she was sorry, truly sorry. I sat with that letter for 2 weeks before responding. My reply was brief. I told her I was not ready to forgive her. Maybe someday, maybe never. I hoped therapy helped. I hoped she became someone she could respect. I made it clear that while I could no longer be her safety net, I no longer carried the guilt for the path she chose. I set a boundary without cruelty or promises. It was enough. That night, I sat on my balcony with Buddy at my feet, watching city lights flicker on as the sky deepened to indigo. My phone buzzed. Daniel sent a photo of Viven sleeping. "Mrs. Vaughan invited me to Sunday dinner. Roger asked about a Dodgers game next weekend." Tomorrow I had another workshop to teach. 23 people had signed up. My life looked nothing like what I'd imagined a year earlier, but I was surrounded by people who cared about me. Not my money, not my assets, just me. I had purpose. I had work that mattered. I had a granddaughter who would know her grandmother through the stories I would tell. I looked up at the stars and spoke softly to the woman who was not there, but always would be. We did good, Vive. Daniel is wonderful. Kristen was raised with love. What she did with it was her choice, not our failure. You'd love Michael and baby Viven. She looks just like you. The city stretched below me, lights sparkling. The air carried jasmine from Mrs. Vaughan's garden. Buddy shifted in his sleep, and I realized something unexpected. I was happy. Not the simple happiness of youth, something deeper, hard one. The happiness of someone broken and rebuilt, who lost much but found more, who learned love could come from unexpected places. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Kristen had 6 more years to serve. The scars would never fully fade. But tonight, with my dog at my feet and messages from people who loved me, I had everything I needed. Life would go on. Thanks to all from Azad Revenge Stories.